Herzlich willkommen zu 99 zu 1. Welcome to 99 zu 1. This is an English episode. We've been waiting to produce this episode for quite a while now, at least since the war on Iran started, because something coincided with that war, which is the reappearance of Hezbollah on the stage, at least for Western eyes. It seemed to have gone. It was destroyed. It was devastated. It was eradicated. Hezbollah has been defeated. That's what people thought. And then suddenly it was back, and back quite strong, maybe even stronger than before. And who else to speak to about this than our wonderful Aurélie Daher. Welcome back, Aurélie.
Hello everyone. Guten Tag. Very happy to be back.
You are one of our fan favorites. So there are very few people that are being asked to get invited as much as you are. So
that's because I paid them.
Okay. Right. So that's your PR strategy. I get it. Okay, but it's working. So we got you back. For everybody who hasn't followed our first 4 episodes on Hezbollah. 5 they were indeed, exactly. Wow, we did 5 episodes, man. A lot of episodes. Based loosely, at least, on this book, Mobilization and Power, Hezbollah by Aurélie Daher. But of course, in the episodes, I would say there were also some updates, and also some updates coming today. So get the book, watch the episodes, follow Aurélie if you can. And for everybody who hasn't seen or read Aurélie, a couple of key points. So Aurélie is a French, English, and Arabic-speaking academic who teaches political science at the sociology of conflicts at University of Paris Dauphine and Institut Pratique du Journalisme and Sciences Po Paris. I think my French is getting better after
Absolutely.
6 episodes. So anybody wants to follow her or read into her book or that, and we'll get right into the soup. So I already kind of set it up since the so-called ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, Lebanon. I think that happened, when was that? November 2024, something like this. We haven't really been talking anymore since then. Can you maybe, or even before then, can you maybe tell us a little bit about how that so-called, I'm saying so-called ceasefire because ceasefire for Israel means the other side ceases and Israel fires. So that's very much how it continued. Can you tell us how the ceasefire came to be? Why would back then Hezbollah accept this kind of ceasefire, even though they stated before, at least, that their intervention in Israel, their intervention in the northern front, the so-called northern front, was supposed to be a support for Gaza. And Gaza was still being destroyed at that point.
Yes. So the ceasefire, as you said, was reached actually a year and a half ago, end of November 2024. Now, it turns out that it could have been reached earlier, as we learned later on, that the former Secretary General of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, was assassinated by Israel in late September 2024. So Hassan Nasrallah had already given his green light for a suspension of the hostilities. Now, the first reason for that is that what was called the pagers and the walkie-talkie attacks, they came as 2 successive destabilizing incidents for Hezbollah. Less, however, for the scope of the damages, which I will talk a bit more in a few minutes. Less because of the scope of the damages than for the discovery by Hezbollah that a large part of their intra-communications were not safe anymore. So that led Hezbollah's leadership to think of taking a step back, if you like, in order to assess and to regroup, to estimate also properly the scope of the Israeli infiltration, if you like. So as we say in French, Hezbollah was in the mood to reculer pour mieux sauter, okay, to take a step back, to come back stronger. So not because obviously they were utterly destroyed, but because they needed to make sense of what was happening, which came as a surprise, and they need to decide on the next move. Another reason for Hezbollah to okay a ceasefire was also to ease the pressure of the Lebanese society, because it was heavily targeted. I'm talking the Lebanese society. And Hezbollah didn't want that. We have to keep in mind that in a 1996 agreement that was reached between Hezbollah and Israel back then, the idea for Hezbollah was that the civilians of both sides should be left out of the equation and the fighting should be limited to the armed forces only, so Hezbollah and the Israeli army. So the fact that the Israelis were going all in, striking the Lebanese civilians is also something that brought Hezbollah to a halt. The idea was, okay, nobody's obviously following the rules or the precedent or the previous agreements. So we need to regroup. We need to reflect on that. Now, from an Israeli angle, on the other side of the barricade, from an Israeli angle, the government didn't want to stop as soon as Hezbollah wanted, in September, basically, in order to have something to show for. Okay, some victory of any kind that the Israeli government could present, first of all, to their society, but also to the West as an illustration, if you like, of both their efficiency and the fact that the massive attack on Lebanon was a relevant choice. It was not for nothing. Now, the problem for the Israelis is that actually, contrary to what they expected from the pagers attack and then the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, those maneuvers basically didn't bring the results they were hoping for. So I'm going to comment a little bit on the pagers thing because that was something that was quite commented on in Western media, but I'm not sure that the most media really caught what was to be seen in those attacks. So the pager attack actually, we're told by the Israelis, was planned for over 17, 18 years. And the plan was to kill 3,000 Hezbollah combatants, so military, 3,000 of them, right? So the idea was, if we decimate a large part of Hezbollah's military force, then all we need to do is launch right afterwards a major invasion of South Lebanon. We'll be able to occupy it. We'll be able to annex it, just like we did in 78 or between 78 and 82. The problem is this: the pagers attack, contrary to what was said in the Western media, it was a flop. It was a flop because out of 3,000 individuals, who were, by the way, mainly civilians, not military, only 30 were killed. So that's to talk like a CEO of a company, that's a return on investment of 1%. Okay, and the Israelis also thought that the assassination of Nasrallah, together with the pagers, would still give them the opportunity to find little resistance in the south. So they did launch, in spite of the small result, they did launch a big invasion. Except that, guess what? They couldn't get in. They couldn't get in. The Hezbollah fighters revealed to be way more determined. Even more because of the attacks and the assassination. So they really were, I would say, out like for a serious revenge. And Israel was impressively made incapable of entering significantly, at least into the south.
That's really interesting because, I mean, in the West, here in Germany, but also in English-speaking media, I mean, this operation with the pagers was hailed as like one of the most successful, such as James Bond spies kind of success story, where in the end, it basically was like a little glorified terror attack, basically. So it didn't really achieve at least the military goals that they had. Of course, it struck a lot of terror into the population, really, to the civilians that were, like, I think also some kids killed and harmed and maimed forever. So, yeah, it's interesting to know that what they tried to achieve by it was not really achieved. Okay, then the ceasefire came to be. At least according to what I remember, I didn't look this up again, but I think part of the ceasefire was also, interestingly, and that also speaks to the failure of Israel's operation in the south, was Israel's withdrawal from the south, which they didn't do in the end, and operations in the south in particular, but also throughout Lebanon, actually persisted during the time of the ceasefire. So can we speak a little bit about what Israel achieved during the ceasefire, and how do you assess their military operation that was going on in Lebanon after Hezbollah stopped fighting back?
Yes, and if I may, just to complete what I was saying, because I was listening to you and then something popped up, and I remember actually regarding the pagers attack that, as you said, was hailed as something like the big comeback of the Mossad, etc. Especially after 2006, like the French media were like everywhere. The TVs, radios were all inviting like military experts who talk like quite a lot about like this is genius. This
it's
is
funny
whatever.
how they nearly got aroused by this shit. Like seriously, the amount of like, I'm sorry to speak like this.
I'm
but
not commenting. I'm not commenting on this thing like this.
Yeah.
Not my
not your choice of words. Yes.
Not my area of expertise. But what is funny is how the media in the West completely missed the two different speeches, the two different discourses that Benjamin Netanyahu gave about the pagers attack. So there was one that he gave basically for Western media saying, amazing, we're great, we did a great job. Hezbollah is like decapitated. That was like again and again that the expression decapitated was so like used, and then, we eradicate Hezbollah. But what they completely, the media, what they completely let aside is, and it was like all over the place in the Israeli news, and I'm talking English-speaking Israeli news. So all the journalists needed to do was to look a little bit into like Israeli media. When he came back to Israel, his first thing was to summon the head of the Mossad, and he gave him such a hard time, saying, "Who gave me such a bunch of losers like you? 1%? You killed only 30 guys out of 3,000. It took you almost 20 years, and eventually you killed only 1%. Who gave me idiots like you?" And honestly, there was some talk about like kicking out the head of the Mossad because of the failure of the pagers attack. So, yeah, interesting point. Personally, I found that.
Yes.
Yeah. The ceasefire. Okay, so what did Israel achieve through the ceasefire? So the ceasefire supposedly started on November 27, 2024. By the spring of 2026, basically now, roughly, so in a bit less than a year and a half, Hezbollah behaved perfectly. Till March, Hezbollah behaved perfectly. One has to be honest here, and we have, as we say in French again, rendre à César ce qui revient à César. You have to give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. I don't know if you use that expression in German. But Hezbollah impeccably respected the terms of the agreement. Quite a different story on the Israeli side, since the Israeli army, as we also kept bombarding Lebanon, Lebanese infrastructures, cities, towns and villages, and according to the Lebanese government, to the Lebanese authorities, basically Israel violated the agreement more than 15,000 times in a year and a half. And I made a little calculus. That's 30 violations per day for 16 months in a row. Okay, so now the question is, what did they gain in this? Okay, what did the Israelis achieve? I would say they achieved maybe two things. The first thing that they achieved, one again has to be honest, same thing. We have to give to Caesar, to the Israeli Caesar, what belongs to the Israeli Caesar. The first thing they managed to do is to bring back the Lebanese far right, mainly represented by the militia of the Lebanese forces. When I say Lebanese forces, I don't mean the Lebanese army, the security services. It's their name, okay? It's the name of it's a former militia that now has turned into a party. So the Israelis brought back that Lebanese far right, mainly the Lebanese forces party, to the center of the partisan life in Lebanon, after they had been kind of, been sitting mainly on the peripheries, or kind of the peripheries of the institutional life for quite some time. So now they're back in the saddle. They're in the middle of the institutional life. And that far right is Israel's number one ally in Lebanon, okay? So the Israeli government put quite a lot of pressure, okay, on the new Lebanese government. The government of Nawaf Salam, that started its work actually in early 2025, so a little bit more than a year ago. Through that far right, basically, Israel has been rather successful at pushing a certain number of points of its agenda. okay, of its priorities. Now, the Salam government was pushed or was forced, I would say, in a very pushy way, okay, into, for instance, addressing the disarmament of Hezbollah, which was something, okay, quite a lot of Lebanese want. So the disarmament in itself is not the problem. The problem is that the Israelis, through the Lebanese forces, forced the government to do it in ways and according to delays that were set by the Israelis and that are objectively unfeasible and non-realistic. Okay, so in spite of all the bombings and killings and destructions and diplomatic pressures, the Israelis, however, here failed to obtain the disarmament, well, at least the disarmament that they hoped for. Okay, and by the way, you can look it up if any of you is interested. There was a great interview a few days ago by Ghassan Salameh, who's the current Minister of Culture in Lebanon. And he has been actually before, in his professional life, a representative of the UN quite a lot of times on very problematic issues, all related to disarmament and the idea of like reintegrating militia in the society, etc., etc. So he talks really in a very clear and objective and very technical way about why the Israeli ways or the Israeli plan for the disarmament cannot function, cannot work. Okay, so that's I think the limits to the first Israeli achievement. I said the Israelis achieved two things. So the second thing I would say, not necessarily actually good news for Israel, paradoxically, is that they revived Hezbollah's legitimacy amongst a large number of Lebanese. Here's the thing. It turns out that in November 2024, okay, when we got the ceasefire, quite a lot of people in Lebanon criticized Hezbollah for the results of the Israeli massive attacks on the country, even Shia, and in actually quite the significant number of them considered back then that Hezbollah was responsible for the Israeli brutality. They said, for instance, that Hezbollah should have never got involved on the side of the Palestinians, that it was a war that didn't concern the Lebanese. The problem is, by not respecting the terms of the ceasefire and by maintaining their bombardments against all sorts of targets in Lebanon, whether Hezbollah related or not, the Israeli army, in very short time, took them just a few weeks, few months. The way I see it is the shift happened between end of November and early February. So it took them 3 months, okay? 3 months to bring back actually the anger of the Lebanese that was targeting Hezbollah, okay, that was aimed at Hezbollah, okay? They shifted that anger to Israel back again, and that obviously came with renewed support to Hezbollah's action. And funnily enough, when I was doing my research in the field, like I was February 2025, it was kind of, I was surprised by the speed of the change. I talked with people in November, and exactly the same ones 3 months later were actually bashing Hezbollah. So they were still bashing Hezbollah, but this time saying, what are you doing, guys? Why aren't you moving? Why are you respecting the terms of the agreement when the Israelis do not? Why aren't you back in the saddle? When are you going to be back in the saddle and fight again? And that's 3 months after having said Hezbollah is at the source of the problem. Now, at the surprise of all the Western governments, we had local elections in 2025 that gave like crazy results. The elections were massively won by Hezbollah in all the towns and cities where the Hezbollah candidates ran. So that's like the perfect illustration of what I was describing, how quick the shift happened and how strong, I would say, the shift happened. It's like, it's forgiven. Hezbollah is forgiven for what happened like in October 8, 2023. At the end of the day, Hezbollah is just the stimulus, is the reaction, but the source of the problem is Israel. And now the critiques against Israel were even stronger than before. And it turns out that I think the West this time gave a serious attention to the results of those elections. And I don't know if you know, but we were supposed this year in May 2026 to have legislative elections. And in early 2025, the anti-Hezbollah camp, like the far right, the Lebanese forces, everybody was, even the West, everybody was looking forward to these elections, saying this is where we're going to have a new parliament in Lebanon, completely rid of Hezbollah, pro-Hezbollah people. So that's going to be, it's the beginning of a new era. And after like sensing that shift in the population, back against Israel, pro-Hezbollah, and then the local elections of 2025 giving Hezbollah like the big winner everywhere, basically both the West, Israel, and the regional powers, obviously mainly Saudi Arabia, put pressure on the Lebanese government, on the Lebanese parties to actually not cancel, but at least postpone the legislative elections. And they did. So we're not having, if everything goes well, we're not having legislative elections before 2028, okay? Because now everybody, both pro-Hezbollah, anti-Hezbollah, everybody understood that if we were to have legislative elections today, Hezbollah would be the number one winner.
Yeah, that sounds like a common democratic practice there. Maybe we can go a little bit more into detail on the Lebanese government. You just mentioned in the end Saudi somehow having some influence there. To most observers of the situation, it pretty much looks like this new government that is in place is basically now a complete vassal of Western and Israeli imperial interests there. So maybe differentiate this out a little bit for us. So how is that to be understood? How was it for, maybe who are the key players that are in the government there, and what's their agenda towards Israel, the US and Hezbollah in particular?
Yes, it's a very tricky situation. So in early January 2025, if you remember, Lebanon finally managed to elect a president. Great news. Everybody was happy because the position was vacant since November 2022. So Lebanon remained without a president for more than 2 years. And by the way, that's not the first time.
No, that's rather common in the last 2 decades.
Yeah, that's a national sport. Like, let's try to run the country without a president. Hey, just for the fun of it. So anyways, more seriously, so after the election of the president, so Joseph Aoun, just a few days later, a prime minister was chosen. Now, here's the thing. It happens to be Nawaf Salam, okay, who's the former head of the International Court of Justice. So he was nominated to become the prime minister. The problem is his nomination was a bit of a surprise, both for the Lebanese, but not only for the Lebanese, because initially most of the Lebanese parties and France wanted, and God knows that France is a key player in the. I mean, it's the number one influential power in Lebanese politics. Most of the Lebanese parties and France wanted to go again with Najib Mikati, okay, who was the previous prime minister, who is usually appreciated for the fact that he's a moderate, he has great skills at, let's put it this way, smoothing tensions whenever there are some amongst the parties. And he did manage a tricky situation with actually rather success. Tricky situations like, for instance, the departure of the Syrians in 2025. So the transition was a little bit complicated. He was nominated, to deal with this, and that was actually he did it rather brilliantly. Again, one has to be honest. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And then he was also the guy who managed to keep Lebanon rather on the stable side of the river, I would say, during the Syrian events. Mid 2010s, I'm talking. So that was a tricky situation for Lebanon, and so he was basically prime minister then. Now, obviously, quite a lot of people do not like him because of the I mean, his name was also mentioned in serious corruption-related dossiers. So you have the guys. He has his fan clubs, and at the same time, he has quite a lot of critiques. But anyways, most of the Lebanese parties consider that the situation now is very tricky. We need a wise man who knows how to deal with tricky situations, and the French really like him. But guess what? No, it turns out that the Americans and the Saudis interpreted the ceasefire of November as a total collapse and total defeat, not of just of Hezbollah, but of Shia politics in the country and France. So basically, they forced their own protege, Nawaf Salam, on everybody. So the choice of Nawaf Salam came a little bit as a surprise. Now, the message, because obviously his nomination was a message, the message was clear. And the idea was Lebanon was to be, let's say, more or less explicitly put under tutelage, just a little bit like in the 90s. And the idea is through Nawaf Salam, the Lebanese politics would be seriously influenced, if not sometimes steered, by American / Saudi / indirectly Israeli agenda. Now, one major feature of this government, I would say, is that it is, as I mentioned, strongly influenced by far-right paradigms. The Lebanese forces ministers, in particular, hold key portfolios, okay? And that more than once created serious tensions within the Lebanese society. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, quite a star, Youssef Raji, was actually the first one to create a scandal with racist remarks on the Shia. And obviously he was not reprimanded for this. He didn't get not even a warning from the Prime Minister, even if the Prime Minister is actually a Sunni, so a Muslim. Youssef Raji also took a certain number of decisions without checking with the government first. The guy, if you watch his style, the guy really answers to Samir Jarjar directly. So he's the head of the Lebanese Forces Party and a king-size war criminal, by the way. So he answers to Samir Jarjar before answering to the government or before acting as a team. So paradoxically, that very insistence by the US / Saudi pair to turn down as much as possible the Shia preferences and promote with all impunity the Lebanese forces, who, by the way, if you think about it, the Lebanese forces, all in all, I'm talking about like their real supporters. I'm not saying people who might share a few ideas, but not all of them. I'm talking like the real supporters of the Lebanese forces. They don't weigh more than 5, maybe 10% of the Lebanese population. So the fact that those guys are now at the heart of the game, after they have been like the most brutal, the most sadist, the most racist, supremacist, exclusivist, collaborationist militia of the civil war, as you can imagine, that does not help the Lebanese government. That widens the gap between the government and quite a large part of the Lebanese population. So, and that, I mean, you don't need to be a genius to understand that in a country where politics is completely polarized between just two sides, okay, it's binary, it's either or, option A, option B, pro-Hezbollah, anti-Hezbollah. If the anti-Hezbollah camp is actually represented mainly by that government and led by the Lebanese forces, who still have the same exclusivist discourses, racist discourses, that definitely, play in the favor of Hezbollah. So paradoxically, that insistence by the Saudis and the Americans to crush the Shia politics in nowadays institutional life has exactly the opposite results. And again, as I said, that definitely plays to the favor of Hezbollah.
Yeah, that's interesting like internally speaking in Lebanon, Hezbollah might have regained that favor, but maybe let's get now to Hezbollah really, because when you look at let's say outside perceptions, even like analysts that I follow that are kind of even like I would say even sympathetic with Hezbollah's case, were like all on the line Hezbollah is done, Hezbollah is over, right? Also a little bit due to the fact that they kind of went into some hibernation mode after the so-called ceasefire. Like Israel you already mentioned that, it kept bombing Lebanon hundreds and thousands of times and did not live up to its obligation to pull back from the south. And instead really started fortifying bases there at multiple spots, which always seemed to be like the red line for Hezbollah. Like Hezbollah is the resistance against occupation, right? So it seemed that the occupation now is back and it's actually fortifying its occupation there. So everybody was like, okay, Hezbollah can only be silent because it was defeated. So now and obviously it was not defeated. We know that now, but the question is now, why were they so silent? Why were they not resisting for so many months?
This is definitely the most important blind spots in the Israeli/American narrative about the downfall of Hezbollah. Okay, this is really the piece of the puzzle that they missed. Hezbollah's big comeback in early March this year, when they attacked Israel seriously for the first time since the ceasefire, to protest against the assassination of the Iranian guide of the revolution, Sayyid Ali Khamenei. So Hezbollah's big comeback was seen in the West and Israel like a totally unrealistic thing. Like, okay, what went wrong? Where what's the equation we missed? So here's the thing. I think it's Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu, The Art of the War.
Yeah, the Chinese war philosopher. Yeah.
Who said that basically one of the basic rules to win a war is to know the enemy and to listen to the enemy, not despise the enemy. And the problem is nobody listened to what Hezbollah said. Hezbollah said quite a lot of things after the ceasefire, actually, even before the ceasefire, when they signed on the ceasefire. They said quite a lot of things. But because the West and Israel considered, you don't exist anymore, so we don't have to listen to the dead. Big mistake. Big mistake. So here's the thing. Hezbollah said, first thing, Hezbollah explained that Israel planned to attack massively Lebanon, okay, in January, okay? In January this year, so a little bit earlier. And it turns out that the Israelis did confirm that. They said, yes, we did plan that. The problem is with the war with Iran. Basically, we got a lot on our plate. So we postponed the thing. So Hezbollah said we attacked in March. It's just a preemptive move. And they were going to attack massively anyway. They were to completely let go of the ceasefire. So we were just the ones to start, to get back into the fight again. But
important to mention this has been confirmed by the IDF. So the IDF confirmed that they were planning this kind of attack, and it was actually just a week or two out. So that was
And funny enough, they even explained why. Sorry, we were busy with Iran, but don't worry, we're good.
Right.
your turn's gonna come. We haven't forgot about you. Just let us finish with the Iranians first. But more importantly, another point is that shortly, we have to come back a little bit more in time because this is rather recent, but shortly after Hezbollah agreed on the ceasefire in November 2024, it also announced, that's the piece that was missing in the Western understanding of what is happening. Hezbollah also announced that it wanted to put the government to the test. That yes, they were going to behave, but actually it was a move to see whether the government was going to be able to do everything the government promised. Okay, the reasoning was this: the government said that Lebanon did not need Hezbollah anymore to defend the Lebanese territory, to defend the south. The major efforts were going to, that's what they promised. Major efforts were going to be made to build a true army, a real Lebanese army, with the proper equipment, the proper arsenal, the perfect training, And then, together with diplomatic connections, the support of friendly governments outside Lebanon, the government said that's quite enough to keep the Israeli capacité de nuisance against Lebanon on check. We don't need Hezbollah between the army and diplomatic channels. We're going to basically recover our sovereignty over the Lebanese territory, and Israel will never bother us again. So Hezbollah said, their answer was, quote unquote, since a lot of people in Lebanon, including the government, consider that everything that goes wrong in the country is our fault, and since the government thinks that they can protect Lebanon without our help, fine, we're going to stand on this side, we're going to behave, we're going to almost disappear. Actually, an Hezbollah official told me, we're going to play a game. We're playing a game. We're going to play the game hide and seek, and poof, Hezbollah doesn't exist anymore. And we're going to see how this goes. Okay, that was the idea. And then Hezbollah gave a deadline. That's also something nobody wanted to hear. Hezbollah gave a deadline. They said that they would wait. Okay, they would give time for the government. They would wait till the elections of 2026, which is basically now. Okay, the spring of 2026. And since, unfortunately, by the way, since the army, unfortunately, because it is unfortunate, the Lebanese army never managed to truly thrive, never managed to really rise in competence. And one here has to be honest, it is less the government's fault than the Western-friendly country and Israel, by the way, who never wanted to truly help the government to build a true army.
I mean, they will not send military, equipment and weapons and tanks to the Lebanese army. This is just ridiculous. This is never going to happen.
Because what is even more ridiculous is the debate between Lebanon. There's now a debate between the Lebanese, and it's very harsh, brutal, violent. You have no idea. Like people sometimes they come like fists, okay, facing each other. The way we understand it in Lebanon, it's you have to make a choice. It's either or. Either the army, either Hezbollah. What the Lebanese do not understand is that they should stand in the Israeli shoes. From the Israeli shoes, it's not either or. It's neither nor.
None. Exactly.
It's neither nor.
Yes.
The idea is we don't want to have a force, an armed force in Lebanon, whatever its nature, whatever its status, whatever it's legal, not illegal, or whether it's the regular army or whether it's a militia. We don't want anyone to be able to stand up to us in Lebanon.
Yes.
So the debate in Lebanon is completely dysfunctional. So. Right. And so to come back to basically to your question. So yes, Hezbollah said, we're going to give you a year and a half and we're going to see how this goes. How's your friends in the West are going to help you? How basically they're going to give you, offer us, Lebanese, a true army. That's not happening. But hey, what the heck? Again, we're going to play a game. We're going to play the game off. We're going to believe you. We're going to give you a chance to achieve what you're doing. And we're going to completely stand in retreat. We're not going to move. Even if the Israelis provoke us, we're not going to move. We're not going to stand in the face of the Lebanese forces. When the Lebanese forces ministers are going to go after the Shia, they're going to name. We're not going to answer. We're going to pretend Hezbollah is gone. Let's see what Lebanon looks like. Let's see the great Lebanon, like the Dolce Vita, without Hezbollah. And then obviously, this is where, as I said, quite a lot of people were like, okay, enough with the BS. We don't believe in Santa Claus again. Unfortunately, we have to go back to Hezbollah. And then this is where the pressure comes on Hezbollah. Please, guys, can you go back to the battle? And then, Ali Khamenei was assassinated in March. So that was roughly the moment where Hezbollah said, if nothing is achieved by then, we will be back in the saddle. So they just used this opportunity, as good as another. Why not? I mean, at the end of the day, and sending a message to the Iranian, hey, we're still here and we're still with you, and this is how they came back, in the saddle. Yeah. So right. no real surprise. If the West and if Israel just looked a little bit more closer to the Lebanese dynamics, internal dynamics, they would have guessed that, no, Hezbollah is not gone. And Hezbollah is going to be back.
What's surprising to them also, and I got to say also me, watching the attacks on Israel, seeing them to be like, really, one can say Hezbollah came back with a vengeance. It's not only Hezbollah is back and is fighting a little bit in the south, but like the attacks, especially the rocket attacks on Israel, were very potent, much more far-reaching into the country, much more precise, hitting targets like radar stations and military targets all over Israel. So can you, that's at least the stuff that I saw. So can you tell us maybe a little bit about, maybe assess the dimensions of these attacks? What is Israel, what is what is Hezbollah actually achieving? What's the dimensions of their operations?
Okay. So I think now everybody's going to be in agreement. Everybody's going to agree on the fact that Hezbollah is actually showing great resilience. Okay, resilience that, as I said, was quite surprising to quite a lot of observers too in the West and even in Israel. I would say that so after the ceasefire of 2024, because I don't think we mentioned that, but we have to clarify for the people who are following us or maybe not following the news with all the details. So after the ceasefire, of 2024, Israel took the opportunity that Hezbollah was not responding to position its army in 5 main spots, on the border. So they reoccupied basically 5 spots on the border, but on the Lebanese side of the border. And they had to wait for the ceasefire in order to do that. Otherwise they couldn't have done that. Now, before March the 2nd, when Hezbollah fired rockets over the north of Israel, or between March the 2nd and April 8th, which is the Black Wednesday, when the Israeli basically army launched a huge, ultra brutal attack on Lebanon on the next day after the ceasefire with Iran. So basically we're talking for a bit more than a month. The Israeli army tried very hard to invade South Lebanon. We heard Israel Katz, who's the Minister of Defense in Israel, who made a huge statement announcing that the invasion, now we're talking seriously, now we're done with the Iranians, as we say in French, poussez-vous les moches, which is stand aside, you ugly guys, we're in. So he announced the big invasion, and he did. I mean, the Israelis launched massively their troops. So big thing, big event. Except for the fact that the Israeli troops found themselves immediately blocked by Hezbollah at the border. And personally, the way I see it is, every time the Israelis talk about going to the ground, setting foot in the field, the way I see it, it's a cry of despair. Because, the Israeli army, they hate to go on the ground. They're not properly trained for ground battles. Decades ago, the strategist of the Israeli army made a big decision, which is to try to find the perfect format for the army so they would get a 0 casualty. They need to reach the 0 dead, 0 casualty within the Israeli army. That means that in order to achieve that, you have to overinvest into, technology, which they did, into attacking and bombing from the air or from the sea. But the thing you don't want to do is set foot on the ground and find yourself in a face-à-face with the enemy, because this is where the enemy becomes dangerous, and you're not going to have a zero dead. So eventually, in terms of training, the Israeli soldiers are not properly trained for a corps à corps, which is exactly the opposite with the Hezbollah combatants. And by the way, this is exactly the same problem that the Americans had when they were bombarding or attacking Iran. Do you remember the answer of Abbas Arakji when he was asked, what do you think about the Americans are threatening to send boots on the ground?
Yeah, he said, let them come. We're waiting for them.
And then he had that little Harrison Ford kind of smile.
Exactly.
Yay, finally. Because that's on the ground that they're going to be able to truly hurt them. We also need to keep in mind that the Israeli army does not know the ground in Lebanon anymore. They don't know the terrain.
Right.
And as they don't know the terrain in Iran. So sending troops on the ground is very dangerous, whether for the Israelis or for the Americans. That's the last thing you do. So when the Israeli says, we're coming massively on the ground, that means basically all the other options failed, and we're forced into doing so. So basically the Israelis know. They know that, like that whole thing about we're going to re-invade Lebanon, re-annex Lebanon, definitely not reasonable. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but while Israel Katz said that, okay, on just after the ceasefire in Iran, a few days later, like maybe 48, 72 hours later, there was that communique in Haaretz by a group of Israeli officers saying, wait, hold on. The objectives and the aims in Lebanon, in South Lebanon, have been totally rethought of, reshaped, and now we have way less big expectations of what we could do actually in South Lebanon. So their objectives have been seriously downsized. So if you look at what is happening right now, the Israelis managed to enter a certain number of towns and cities, but what they do, so that gives the impression that they did re-invade, reoccupied. But guess what? They don't stay. They enter the villages, they enter the stuff like Bint Jbel or Khiyam. They come, they bomb everything, they destroy it, and then they retract. They cannot stay because obviously Hezbollah is there and Hezbollah is going to dislodge them. So the idea is come, destroy. If we cannot occupy the area, at least we need to make it a totally non-inhabited area, a totally like a desert, where basically no people, nothing can grow, no habitations, no cities, nothing. So they're more into a progressive destruction, piece by piece, little by little. But I'm not. It's a little bit complicated to know how things are going to move in the next weeks, because obviously Lebanon is part of the Iranian negotiations. The Iranians do not want to let go of Lebanon. That means that probably the Israeli plans to continue the utter destruction of South Lebanon might come to a halt, hopefully. But it might. That does not mean that the bombardments, every now and then, and the assassinations won't continue. But the idea of Israel reoccupying, annexing Lebanon, just like they did in 78 or 82, I don't think that's going to happen. That's not possible.
Yeah, it's even now with the ceasefire in effect, I think since last night, if I'm correct, the debate already starts. Like, are they going to stay there? Are they going to withdraw? And it seems like that is still an open question.
And Hezbollah made it clear. Hezbollah made it clear. It's like, we're playing the long game. It's going to take the time. Whatever the time we're going to need to do so, we're going to kick you out. Even the 5 positions, you're going to have to give them back. We're going to kick you out, even if it's in 20 years. And the thing is, Netanyahu is not eternal. They are having elections at the end of the year in Israel. Obviously, there's a little bit of trouble on the home front. And then we also need to know what's going to happen to Donald Trump. He's also in trouble on the home front. He'll be gone, whatever happens in 2 years. The whole relationship between the Americans and the Israelis is into complete mutation. So time is not on the side of the Israelis. That's one thing we know for sure.
Yeah, and also like the first occupation was fought back also not in a couple of months, right? It also took years for the Israelis to stay there and just take attrition and attacks constantly until in the end they announced their retreat, and Hezbollah said, but you don't have time until June. You're leaving now. Yeah. And they left now. So
yeah. They were supposed to left. Ehud Barak announced officially a date in July, and eventually
July, exactly.
They just fled by moonless nights, and they left everything in May.
So that's maybe just a side note. I've heard that there are also some other Shiite organizations fighting, that it's not only Hezbollah. Apparently there are, some militias there that are also engaged with the Israeli occupation. Do you know something about this?
Okay, let's be honest. Hezbollah is doing most of the work. Amal, at some point, that was interesting, but we saw it already in 2024. Amal, at some point, did have a few fighters organized like in small cells, local cells mainly, like in certain villages and certain towns where Amal is popular and well settled. So we did have like those small organized cells, but less formally organized, less institutionalized. They did participate, yes, in the fight. For instance, I heard about a few Amal guys who set like a few traps for the Israelis, artisanal minefield before their jeeps and tanks. There's also something else. There's what is called the Lebanese Brigades for the Resistance against the Israeli occupation. It's a very long name. So it's Saraya al-Muqawama al-Lubnaniya. So it's a multi-confessional group, okay, armed group, obviously, but that is trained by Hezbollah. And it's not like they really brought a significant contribution onto the battlefield. Hezbollah does not like them. Here's the thing. They were basically that group, those brigades, they were created by Hezbollah at the end of the 90s because there was some critiques against Hezbollah's action, saying, but there are quite a lot of people in Lebanon who would also like to fight against Israel, and we feel a little bit that through Hezbollah, the Shia have hijacked the cause of the resistance. What about other communities, other sects, Sunnis, Christians, Druze, who would also like to fight? Could you guys give us a little bit of room? That was the idea. And Hassan Nasrallah said, okay, no problem. I get it. And the more the merrier. So what we're going to do is, obviously, you need a little bit of organization, training. You're going to need weapons. So what about we help you organize this? So this is where they created the brigades that are, as I said, multi-confessional, mainly Sunni and a little bit of Druze. But in the same time, if you talk with Hezbollah officials, like, okay, what's the real valeur ajoutée, added value, like in the field? They're like, we do send them do like little stuff, like, as I said, put a mine on the track of an Israeli tank, or set a trap, for instance, for Israeli soldiers on a fake checkpoint, stuff like that. That's what they did in the last years of the occupation, the last years of the 1990s. He said, but every time like there's serious, that's what he said, the official said, every time like there's serious fighting, no, we keep the kids aside. And he said we wouldn't want them to get hurt.
Yeah, I imagine also in terms of...
I hope they're not watching. But
I think in terms of the concern for the infiltration that they were facing in 2024, that would probably be also a concern in the sense of to be much more encapsulated.
Yes, you're quite right. And at the same time, what we see also is regular people, like average citizens, who, either as a family, either as a group of friends in some villages, they just, go to the fight, to protect their villages, because, for instance, there's a bunch of Israeli tanks coming in. So you also have I would say, a popular, ad hoc, instantaneous kind of resistance that comes from average citizens who just grab, their own personal rifle, handguns, and they just shoot at the Israelis. Next to obviously Hezbollah fighters fighting a few hundred meters on the side. So it's honestly it's a common effort, and the South, it's not just it's Hezbollah is doing, as I said, the largest part of the work, and obviously the heaviest part of the work, and they are the ones with the rockets and the proper training. But as I said, average citizens have also joined the battle too. It's like no pasaran. We don't want to go back to what we lived between 1978 and 2000. The years of the occupation is still very fresh in the memories of quite a lot of Lebanese. The trauma was passed on from generation to generation. So even the ones who didn't live the Israeli occupation, they have such a traumatic idea of it that they're like, I'd rather die but not live this again. At the end of the day, between 78 and 2000, that's 22 years. And in 22 years, the Israelis managed to get rid of 75% of the population of South Lebanon. That's huge.
Right.
That's huge. So no, the people of the South, Shiite or not Shiite, they're like, we will settle our differences with Hezbollah later, but for now, no pasaran. The Israelis are not coming back.
Yeah, I think it was in our episode on Hezbollah's popularity in Lebanon that we spoke quite intensively about the occupation. So go back and check that episode. So now Trump, by the way, announced a ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel. It was not Netanyahu. I think a couple of days before there were some announcements of Netanyahu or Israel negotiating with Lebanon on some kind of ceasefire, but the announcement came rather cold out of the air and apparently shocked some Israelis, including Netanyahu, quite a bit. But before that, when they were still negotiating, what was floated in media was that it all hinges on the question of the disarmament of Hezbollah. You already hinted at that. So. And it seems to be also still the program that at least Israel for sure, the US, let's see how they are going to follow this. So how realistic do you think this? Is there now a chance? Has something changed? I mean, we talked about this already like a year ago, but is there a chance now after this time that the Lebanese military will go against Hezbollah or something like this in order to disarm them? Because they clearly stated that they are not going to play game. So
I'm gonna smile like Aragji. Do you watch those little Lego videos on Instagram, the Iranian Lego videos?
Yes. Oh my God.
And at some point, what is even funnier is American average people commenting on the videos. And at some point, there was one about Aragji and his smile, and they said it's becoming a thing. It's like, oh, he gave me Aragji. I was talking with a guy. I went to buy bread, and I said, dude, like, how much does that cost? And oh, come on, that's super expensive. He gave me that. He gave me Aragji.
I didn't know that.
And it's like it's a thing in America. Everybody knows that. What's Aragji? Nobody knows who Abbas Aragji is.
Yeah,
but
sure.
They know he gave me Aragji, like that funny half smile, which says, yeah, keep talking.
Okay.
No, back to being serious, because actually it's a very serious topic.
Of course.
The idea of what can seriously the Lebanese government do when it comes to disarmament of Hezbollah. No, it's not possible for the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah, but again, not in the fashion and with the deadlines that were drafted by the Israeli government. So here we have a problem of, I would say, methodology and a problem of pace, okay? Methodology and pace, how to do it and with which calendar, according to which calendar. Disarming Hezbollah, first of all, cannot happen without Hezbollah's consent, d'accord? No one in Lebanon, not even the Lebanese army, has the means to do it by force. And trying to do so by force will lead to civil violence, for sure, episodes of civil violence. I'm not talking about civil war. And I'm not talking, by the way, when I say episodes of civil violence, I'm not talking about Hezbollah attacking the Lebanese army or the Lebanese institutions or Lebanese people. I'm not talking about that. And we're not going to have that. Hezbollah said it so many times, and Hezbollah won't do that. I'm talking about average citizens with their own guns, once again, because, again, everybody's armed in Lebanon. They will interfere to push back anyone or the army or any militia or whatever kind of collective initiatives that will try to disarm Hezbollah by force. At the end of the day, one has to, a little bit of sociology, right? At the end of the day, Hezbollah can be summarized, just like any militia, it can be summarized as a part of the society in arms. What is Hezbollah? It's a part of the Lebanese society, bearing weapons, being a little bit organized military, quite a lot organized militarily. But at the end of the day, they're part of the Lebanese society. And the question is, how do you disarm society? Whether in the Lebanese case or in any other case, how do you do that technically? We might need to take a look into other cases to really measure how tough actually the challenge is. I was talking with an American friend the other day exactly about that. And funnily enough, the Americans understand better than the French, better than the Israelis, why it is difficult. Because guess what? They have kind of the same problematic at home. Every time there's a massive shooting in the US, right? Whether in a school, in a movie theater, somewhere else, the debate comes back on the table between Republicans, Democrats, etc. But there's like a huge public debate about how either we could retrieve weapons from the wrong hands or from the hands of some individuals, or how could we control a little bit better those weapons. Every time there's a big debate in the US, and every time the conclusion is almost always the same, is there's no recipe to take guns away from the hands of people if they do not want to give it willingly. So what we need to do is to really work on a true and truthful and constructive and mainly based on trust kind of partnership between Hezbollah and the Lebanese states, without foreign intervention, without foreign calendars, it has to happen between Hezbollah and the Lebanese state, because it has to happen between the state and a part of its society, the state and its society. And the fact, as I said, that Israel is monitoring and driving the whole thing is actually the best recipe for failure. Cannot work.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of consent only works if there is like a joint purpose for that. But obviously the purpose of disarming Hezbollah is not in anyone's interest in Lebanon. I mean, it's in Israel's interest. They want that. At least they want to have that win after they can't get it militarily. They want to be able to say something to their voters. Yeah, look, we disarmed them. But
yes, but in the same time, there's a huge Israeli paradox. So in one way, they want to defeat Hezbollah in order to basically be able to say, yeah, so what we're doing, we're killing innocents. But
it was all worth it, yeah.
But it was worth it, yeah. Collateral damage, in order to, the objective justifies the means. The problem is, in the same time, they don't want Hezbollah to disappear. I mean, I find it very hard to believe that the Israeli governments, they're not idiots, okay? But I find it difficult to believe that they're not aware, for instance, that bombarding Lebanon, not respecting the ceasefire, is actually helping Hezbollah, okay? So the question is, what's the use of Hezbollah to Israel? Actually, Hezbollah is quite useful. Because if we really didn't have Hezbollah and it was only the Lebanese army, okay, why would Israel, what would be the excuse for Israel to go, and invade Lebanon and bombard Lebanon? And we all know, and it's something that the Israelis admit, and they say it and they yell it, that they are interested into annexing a part of Lebanon. So if there is no Hezbollah, then it's just a country invading their neighbors who didn't ask for it, who are no bother for them, who are no threat for them. So it's just a regular occupation, annexation. It's a theft of a part of somebody else's country. If there is Hezbollah, then but no, we're not trying to annex it. We're just fighting terrorism. So no, Israel has no interest at all in seeing Hezbollah disappear completely.
To be fair, they also go and annex countries and parts of countries where there is no enemy force, like in Syria, for example. But what I would say is probably what they definitely gain by Hezbollah, and that's clear, is like that's their justification for their all-out rampant genocidal violence, basically, and trying to destroy what's left of Lebanese state capacity. So yeah, let's see about this. Lebanon has been pounded from north to south now. Again, you already talked about March 8th, which was like a horrible massacre, not only in the south, but also in Beirut mainly. And of course, now there are up to 1 million people, I think, are displaced. I heard that myself by family that I have there, that they are now dealing with the fallout of all of this. So, what is, if it's possible to summarize it in some way? Of course, it's always difficult given such a diverse population. But what is the position towards Hezbollah now? Because that was the calculation back then, right? So we kind of pound Hezbollah, and when we pound Hezbollah and all Lebanon, the people will be against Hezbollah. And that, I mean, you explained yourself that in the beginning it kind of worked. For a while at least. So what's the position? What's the position now? How is this changing there?
Okay, so amongst the displaced, I would say, well, obviously there are different points of view. Okay, some people, they loathe Hezbollah and they see them as the cause of the current tragedy. Others criticize Hezbollah, but they're perfectly aware that Hezbollah is just a reaction to the stimulus, okay, and to a trigger, and the trigger is Israel, and what Israel is doing against Lebanon. So while those people are criticizing Hezbollah for what they're doing, for some initiatives that were obviously that they didn't like why did you want to avenge, for instance, the death of Ali Khamenei? Why did you start it all over again? And then we know the Hezbollah's answer, which is the Israelis were going to attack us massively once again. So we just basically were the first to go. So you have those two different opinions. And then there are people who, in spite of everything, still support Hezbollah unconditionally. We saw it, as I said, in the results of the elections last year. Here's the thing, because obviously I mean, I can understand that from a Western point of view, it's a little bit complicated to understand. Like, because of Hezbollah, they lost their homes, they're losing their families. What if Hezbollah never started a support campaign to the Palestinians on October 8th, etc. But in the same time, the problem is these people feel that they have, first of all, to choose between the less of two evils, or that they are left with two difficult choices. Those people basically are between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that, okay, option one is supporting Hezbollah, and they know that Hezbollah is going through a hard time right now. They know that, for instance, Hezbollah cannot rebuild their houses the way it used to. Hezbollah cannot maybe pay them compensation the way it did, etc. But they still, well, first of all, trust Hezbollah to do the best they do. They have admiration, obviously, for the fighters who, in spite of everything, like the courage of the fighters. And the problem is that the other option, the alternative, would be to let go of Hezbollah, to trust a government that they see as actually completely powerless. They feel like the second option is even worse. Like, they would be even more powerless by trusting the government than trusting Hezbollah. And now the government, I mean, in particular the Nawaf Salam government, for quite a lot of displaced, mainly Shia, is seen as a racist government, a government that is taking orders from external malevolent countries. So between the two, they're like, nothing. I mean, there's no ideal solution, but Hezbollah is less bad, dirty, corrupted, coward than the government. What is really tragicomic, I don't know if in the story, is that at the end of the day, the Hezbollah's two worst enemies, which are the Lebanese forces on the inside and Israel on the outside, Hezbollah's two worst enemies are actually Hezbollah's best assets. There's some talk, every time I hear Samir Jaja, for instance, or somebody in the Lebanese forces saying, oh, Hezbollah, they want to assassinate us. They have a plan to assassinate, especially all the party, because we are the true Lebanese. They want to assassinate Samir Jaja. And I'm like, dudes, you have no idea. The last people who want you dead in Lebanon, that's Hezbollah. Because every time you open your mouth you are actually bringing the Shia even more, and everybody who loves racism, basically, closer to Hezbollah. Every time Samir Jarjar opens his mouth, 10 points for Hezbollah. A few days ago, he gave that huge speech. Samir Jarjar gave a huge speech when he was talking about very soon we will be rid of our, opponents, and because as soon as this is the sentence he used, as soon as we will be done decapitating all the snakes, then the true Lebanon will be able to emerge. By the snakes, he meant the Shia. The guy is talking about exterminating more than half of the Lebanese population. He called them snakes. And then everybody wonders, how come the Lebanese still support Hezbollah? Honey, it's not that they support Hezbollah. It's like, how can you follow a guy like this? That's the problem. That's the problem. So no, Hezbollah is not gonna assassinate Samir Jarjar. Not at all. And exactly as I said, by the way, that the Israelis need Hezbollah as a cover for their actions in Lebanon. Yeah, Israel is doing a favor to Hezbollah in return by acting like a rogue state.
By being Israel, exactly. I asked that question already in the last episode we had, and obviously it's on the table again, so I'm going to ask again. And also, I already had you for quite a long time. Sorry, Aurélie, it took a bit longer. But this last question now. How about the civil war? So everybody always hints at, internal collapse, everything is collapsing in Lebanon. I mean, everything has been collapsed since quite a while, I think. But anyway, it's collapsing, and Israel and the US, obviously, they seem to wish for failed states all around Israel. That's what they are aiming for, at least. So is there any chance of this danger coming up?
No, that's maybe one piece of good news or a little bit of hope here in this regard. Personally, and I really hope I'm not wrong, but I think I'm reasonable, and there are more than one factual reasons that make me believe so. So I don't believe in a civil war anytime soon in Lebanon. Now, as I said earlier, I don't exclude episodes of civil violence, but civil violence and civil war, two different things, okay? I'm pretty sure, actually, if we have like those episodes of violence, I don't know, like, Shia and Sunnis or Shia Christians or whatever starting to fight on the streets. I'm pretty sure that if that happens, the Lebanese elites of all kinds, of all sects, will immediately jump in to interfere and turn the heat down. I'm pretty sure. And we saw it actually a few days ago. We had in Beirut an anti-government demonstration, mainly Shia people. So that was organized a few days ago, and Hezbollah and Amal, so both big Shia parties, both said that they didn't support the initiative. They didn't want, actually, they didn't call for the event, and they said that they rejected any violence between the Lebanese. At the end of the day, in terms of probability of a civil war, we need to keep in mind that it takes two to tango, right? So a civil war is not going to happen between one party and then nobody else in front of them, facing them. You need to have at least two parties, two groups who would like to fight in order to have a civil war. And at the end of the day, in Lebanon, apart from the far right, so again the Lebanese Forces Party, but one has to be honest, not all of them. I'm pretty sure not even all of the Lebanese forces, but some of the Lebanese forces. Apart from those, nobody wants a civil war in Lebanon. Okay, nobody wants that. And then there's another thing. A civil war, again, sociology. A civil war is a dynamics of violence that needs time. What I mean by that is you need to have violence going on at a high intensity for months, for years maybe, before the events can qualify and be depicted as a civil war. Remember what happened in Syria. When things, turned sour and we started to have the first armed clashes, we talked about like clashes, and it's only after maybe a year that, experts, politicians, academics alike started to say, okay, that's a civil war. That's a full-blown civil war, qualifies, ticks all the boxes. So you need time. And sorry to put it this way, but let's make the assumption. Let's be realistic. Let's suppose, hypothetically, that the Shia, d'accord, who are the ones who are the most harshly targeted by the far right now, okay, continuously provoked and insulted. Let's assume that the Shia were to engage in collective violence against the Lebanese forces, the army, whatever, okay? The Shia are more than half of the Lebanese population. They are the best organized. They're the best trained militarily. The Shia's adversaries in general, I mean, they're either fragmented or they don't know how to fight, or they're too small a community. So whoever wants to go after the Shia probably would have to surrender in, 48, 72 hours, definitely less than a week. Okay? That's not a civil war. That's not a civil war. And by the way, if this were to happen, and it won't, but by the way, if it were to happen, that would also mean the end of the current government, the fall of the current government, because they would have to resign, okay? And that's definitely not something that even the far right or the West of Israel wants. Quite the opposite. I mean, they did postpone the legislative elections for 2 years because they want to maintain that government as long as they can. So no, I don't think we're going to have a civil war, no.
All right, Aurélie, thanks for this update. Let's hope, there is a ceasefire going on since yesterday, and let's hope that brings some reprieve and maybe even stays in some way, becomes permanent. Of course, it all depends on what's happening with the talks with Iran, as Iran already stated that they're not going to let Hezbollah hang in the air. So let's see how that develops, and we'll call you up if new things happen. Thanks a lot for your time, Aurélie. Thanks again for being here.
Welcome. And can I add a little thing, advertise a little bit?
Yes.
For a little cause of mine. So we started in my university, my colleagues and I, academics, who are heading the we're heading the a master's program in conflict transformation and peace studies. We started a charity association called Enfinome Lebanon. We have a website, enfinome.org, and we're trying to help the children of Lebanon, and obviously mainly the displaced ones. We don't ask people their political preferences. We give a like to anyone who's in need, and we always distribute in an even way between the communities. We're working. We've been working for the last month with orphanages because a lot of children lost their parents, or at least one of their parents, and those orphanages are taking children, again, whatever the sects, all sects, all political backgrounds. So we're trying to help them, obviously, with money. We also have a part of our program. We're trying to get medication, clothes. So if you guys feel it in your heart to help us, that would be absolutely lovely. FYI, with €1, you can buy 2 cubes of soaps. So that's 2 weeks for a whole family to stay clean. So it doesn't take much to have a great impact.
And of course, you can find the links to this under this video in the description or under the podcast file.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Aurélie, and see you soon. All the best. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Leute, wir brauchen eure Hilfe. Wenn euch dieses Video gefallen hat, klickt auf Like, abonniert den Kanal und vergesst nicht, das Glöckchen zu drücken, damit ihr benachrichtigt werdet, wenn wir neuen Content droppen.
Außerdem solltet ihr uns überall folgen, wo wir verfügbar sind. Das ist Facebook, Instagram, Twitter und Twitch. Und wenn wir irgendwelche Ankündigungen machen oder Posts, dann shared, was das Zeug hält. Gebt uns all eure Liebe.
Wir haben mittlerweile ziemlich signifikante Kosten. Wenn ihr es euch irgendwie leisten könnt, unterstützt uns doch auf Patreon. Dann kommt ihr auch in den Genuss verschiedener Vorteile, wie zum Beispiel Zugang zu unserer Discord-Community oder Zugang zu den ultrageheimen Patreon-Episoden, die wir dort posten. Außerdem könnt ihr uns natürlich auch über PayPal Spenden zukommen lassen.
Außerdem haben wir mittlerweile einen eigenen Online-Shop. Das heißt, wenn ihr euch immer noch fragt, was ihr euren Lieben zu Weihnachten, Ostern oder sonst wie schenken könnt, geht dorthin und kauft duftes Merch.
Alle Links dazu hier in der Beschreibung oder auch auf unserer Webseite 99zu1.de.
Vielen Dank fürs Dabeisein, danke für die Unterstützung und wir sehen uns in diesem Theater.